live streamed, temper joined, live streamed,
Kevin, we can hear you.
temper joined. Temper joined.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. We're here on Co-working Live with Red Worldwide, and we are so excited that you are here with us. And so with that said, today we are going to deep dive. And I want to say, I don't know as much as if it's a deep dive as it is just a resurgence of information that Kevin Janeway shared with us last week with regards to cognitive behavioral education. And it's so important that we have these soft skills to help those we work with, to help us with all of the types of things we need help with. I know a lot of us, who are in business did not necessarily go through a whole level of training before we got here. And some of us brought some of our habits with us, or we didn't necessarily have a skill set that would allow us to really be proficient at dealing with people. I mean, dealing with people sometimes is a big challenge. And I can say that from my experience, because I have been a serial entrepreneur, that over the years, I have dealt with many different types of people. Some people were easy to love, other people, I had to work at it. And, but because we lead with love in our organizations that we have run, it's been amazing to have the opportunity to get more experience at, sharing, serving, being able to meet a specific requirement, in a business. And so with that said, we're going to bring Kevin up so he can tell us a little bit more about cognitive behavior therapy, cognitive behavioral coaching, cognitive behavioral education. Those are skills that, some of us have, gone the length of getting some training for. I actually am a cognitive behavior coach. I have a set of skill set that I had to really study for several hours to my credit, have gone into bringing on this skill set in my life. 18 hours of psychology. And then after the 18 hours of psychology, I went back and did the cognitive behavioral therapy education. So, and that was graduate level work before getting the CBT coaching program into my life. And when I did that, it changed a lot of things as far as how I dealt with people. I also went ahead and did the emotional, intelligence coaching because I needed to have this skill set, Kevin. I needed to make sure that I could really deal with people better. When you're a leader, and we talked about this on yesterday's podcast, when you are a leader, it's important that you have a certain level of skills so that you can have more to offer, more to model, for people within your organization to follow, that they would be able to put things forth and have it make sense for everything that they're doing. And so with that said, we have really begun to, make sure that people are very well trained in every area so that they can offer more to the clients and more to each other, as we're together wanting to serve others in our organization. And with that said, Kevin, I'm going to pass the mic, so you can share a little bit about what cognitive behavior education is all about and why we need it, and then kind of take us through, a recap of what you've already shared, and bring us, into a place of, where we could actually use it, and make good use of it. Okay, and so take it away.
Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Kevin Janeway. I'm a certified professional life coach, and I also am the customer care concierge person for Red Worldwide, and I thought to capitalize on what we've already gone through, I would actually take you through an actual meeting, what an actual meeting looks like, so you can get a feel for the process. So this is cognitive behavioral education, and it's universal. It doesn't, one does not have to identify with having like a mental health issue in order to use this. It's applicable to many different situations. Cognitive means thinking, and behavioral, it has to do with our actions. So it's our thinking that precedes our actions. It's our, and so if we ever have issues in our thought process, maybe self-doubt or self-consciousness, it might be temper related. It might be related to, if we have angry outbursts or whatever. It's learning how to control and manage using our will to help train ourselves so that we can respond more effectively, and we can respond instead of reacting. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Give me a second here. Screen broadcast. Okay. Broadcast. Okay. Let's see, what am I doing? Okay. So I'm sharing my screen, and I'm going to bring up my Kindle. Can everybody see that screen? Okay. I'm hoping you can see the screen. So a regular meeting starts with me saying, I'm Kevin, and I'm in recovery. In Recovery International. I've been studying this philosophy since 2015, and this is not a religious program, or it's not particularly spiritual or anything like that. It just is some educational techniques that we can utilize to help ourselves and empower ourselves. So a meeting generally starts with a reading from one of Dr. Abraham Lowe, piece of literature. And this is a concise outline of recovery self-help techniques. And I was going to go ahead and start reading. I hope that's okay with you to read, and we can take turns reading so there's a chance for audience participation. So this gives you, I want to expand on what we studied already before. And so this is going to give you kind of a background. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start. So a concise outline of recovery self-help techniques. Recovery Incorporated was founded November 7th, 1937 by 30 ex-patients who regained their health after receiving shock treatments or other therapies at the Psychiatric Institute of the University of Illinois Medical School. Dr. Abraham Lowe was at the time the assistant director of the Institute. Between 1937 and 1940, the organization limited its services to the patients admitted to the wards of the Psychiatric Institute. In the fall of 1940, it expanded its work to include the psychoneurotic patients at the outpatient department. In September 1941, the group severed its connection with the University of Illinois Medical School and established headquarters of its own in the Chicago Loop District. After 1942, the bulk of its membership was recruited from Lowe's private practice. During its early years, Recovery Incorporated had the opportunity to try out its techniques, one, with an intramural patient population, and two, with an outpatient group, and three, with private patients. The object of Recovery Incorporated, apart from its tendency to save time for the professional and money for the patient, is to help prevent recurrences in mental diseases and to forestall chronicity in psychoneurotic conditions. Its techniques place the emphasis on self-help. The residual symptom of the recovered mental patient. After leaving the hospital, the mental patient is supposed to be restored to health. This is true in most instances if mental health is meant by the absence of delusions and hallucinations of violent impulsiveness and indifference to group standards. But returning to the community, the patient still suffers from restlessness, tenseness, and preoccupation. His inability to relax is aggravated by the sense of being stigmatized. Many returned patients are so suspicious of being watched or mistrusted that even simple inquiries like, "How do you feel?" or "How are you today?" are likely to cause irritation. These innocent questions may suggest to the patient that the reality of recovery is doubted. Feeling stigmatized, the patient becomes self-conscious and introspective. On a given night, he may have difficulty falling asleep. This is apt to cause alarm. The alarm increases the difficulty sleeping. The more alarm, the more sleeplessness, and the more alarm yet. A vicious cycle is thus set going, which may keep the patient from properly resting night after night. Other vicious cycles may soon establish themselves. The patient notices a sense of fatigue, which in itself may be as insignificant as any sensation of fatigue experienced by the average person. But feeling stigmatized, he correlates his tiredness with the possibility of relapse. And the more he dreads the relapse, the more intense becomes the fatigue. The heavier the fatigue, the more haunting the fear of relapse. Does anyone else care to read, or would you like me to continue? Okay, I'll continue. One patient had a nocturnal itch after returning home. Another complained of a twitch in one arm. A third felt a hair on the tongue. Experiences of this kind are distressing enough to conjure up the vision of an impending relapse. The experiences become far more terrifying when the patient observes, for instance, that the arm suddenly begins to shake in automatic motion, or when awful flashes shoot across the eye. Patients reported an electric buzz running through my muscles, and that my tongue lay stiff in my mouth, that my own voice sounded strange, that my ear felt pushed in, that I can't seem to hear myself when I speak. Palpitations, numbness, head or chest pressures, dizziness, difficulty of concentration, dimness of vision, air hunger, headaches, nausea, and scores of other disturbances are typical reported symptoms. Observations of this sort may give rise to the vicious cycle, which has the familiar character of the symptom increasing, the fear intensifying and perpetuating the symptom. While there are no statistics to substantiate the claim, it is fair to assume that many recurrences of mental ailments are the direct result of these residual symptoms, which, fanned by the fury of the vicious cycle, produce anxieties and panics, which finally necessitate the much dreaded recommitment. The defeatism of the chronic psychoneurotic patient. Most residual symptoms from which the returned mental patient is likely to suffer are similar to or identical with the common complaints voiced by psychoneurotic patients, hence the possibility of treating both groups by the same method. The psychoneurotic patients treated by Dr. Lowe belonged mainly in the category of chronic, protracted cases. Most had a record of 2 or 20 years of suffering. Such experienced sufferers have made the rounds of physicians and clinics and have been assured on numerous occasions, explicitly or by implication, that some therapeutic measure would cure them. The assurance never materialized, with the result that they no longer believe a cure possible. They know, however, that some or most of the past therapies had a transient palliative effect. The palpitations were milder after a reassuring talk. The dizziness yielded to a sedative, hence they treasure the pep talk or the prescription. In order to secure these elusive aids, they must complain, they must convince the professional that they really suffer, that their pains are not imaginary, that they can positively not stand their fatigue. To get a hearing from a professional is all the more important because at home, their complaints are likely to be met with impatience or ridicule. Complaining then becomes a vital part of their daily routine. In the course of years, they develop the consummate art of the expert complainer. What these long-term patients crave is a sympathetic ear, which after years of griping, they can no longer secure from their relatives and friends. They delight in a lengthy discussion of their fears and frustrations. Their ideal is to be explored, analyzed, sounded, and probed. Essentially, they have decided that their case is beyond repair. What they expect is a hearing, perhaps some temporary relief, not a final cure. The chronicity of this group has little to do with the nature of the symptoms, with diagnosis or etiology. It's self-appointed defeatism. Since recovery places the emphasis on the self-help action of its members, it ignores investigations and explorations which are not within the province of inexperienced laypersons. Complexes, childhood memories, dream experiences, and subconscious thought are entirely eliminated from the self-help effort. The psychoneurotic individual is considered a person who, for some reason, developed disturbing symptoms leading to ill-controlled behavior. The symptoms are in the nature of threatening sensations, intolerable feelings, uncontrollable impulses, and obsessive, unbearable thoughts. The very vocabulary, with its frenzied emphasis on the killing headache, the dizziness that drives me frantic, the fatigue that is beyond human endurance, is ominously expressive of defeatism. The first step in the psychotherapeutic management of these chronic individuals must be to convince them that the sensation can be endured, the impulse controlled, the obsession checked. Unfortunately, the professional is far from convincing. Any attempt to sell the idea of mental health arouses the sales resistance of the patient. The physician doesn't dare tell me the truth, muses the patient. It would be against his ethics to declare me incurable. The resistance is easily overcome in the group. The fellow sufferer who explains how she licked her frightful palpitations after years of invalidism cannot possibly be suspected of trying to sell something. That colleague is convincing and convinces the novice that chronic conditions are not hopeless. The setback. Low required patients to attend Recovery Incorporated meetings for at least 6 months. The average member may experience a considerable initial improvement through participation in the recovery program, but the improvement is, as a rule, as short-lived as was the relief that the patient used to gain from the visits to the clinics and doctor's offices. Between meetings, the novice is apt to suffer a setback. She is again tortured by that awful fatigue, or has been unable to sleep a wink for 3 nights in succession, or the fear of doing harm to the baby reappears after it was gone for a short while. Recovery warns its members to be on guard against the unavoidable setback. When difficulty is experienced, members may call a veteran member for assistance between members. The calls are limited to approximately 5 minutes, but additional 5-minute calls can be made if needed. The symptomatic idiom. If recovery members are to help and teach one another, they must be instructed to use a language which is not confusing. This is particularly important because language, if used glibly, tends to be alarmist and defeatist. By dint of its defeatist insinuations, language frequently engenders tenseness, which reinforces and perpetuates symptoms. To avoid the fatalistic implications of the language used by the patient, an alternative terminology must be supplied in matters of mental health. There are many languages, features and gestures speak, so do symptoms. Their languages is a one-word idiom, danger. This is called the symptomatic idiom. Accepting the suggestions of the symptomatic idiom, the patient considers violent palpitations as presaging sudden death. Pressure in the head is viewed as due to a brain tumor. Tenseness is experienced as so terrific that the patient fears she is going to burst. Her fatigue does not let up 1 single minute, and how long can the body stand it? In these instances, the implications of the symptomatic idiom are those of an impending physical collapse. If phobias, compulsions, and obsessions dominate the symptomatic scene, the resulting fear is that of mental collapse. After months and years of sustained suffering, the twin fears of physical and mental collapse may recede, giving way to apprehensions about the impossibility of a final cure. This is the fear of the permanent handicap. The three basic fears of physical collapse, mental collapse, and permanent handicap are variations of the danger themes suggested by the symptomatic idiom. Temper and temperamental lingo. Another source of defeatism is temper. Recovery members are taught that temper has two divisions. One comes into play when I persuade myself that a person has done me wrong. As a result, I become angry. This is called angry or aggressive temper, which appears in various shades and nuances: resentment, impatience, indignation, disgust, hatred, etc. The other variety of temper is brought into action whenever I feel that I am wrong. This gives rise to moral, ethical, and aesthetic fears, or to the fear of being a failure in pragmatic pursuits. I am afraid that I sinned, failed, blundered. In short, that I defaulted on a moral, ethical, or aesthetic standard, or on the standard of average efficiency. This is called fearful or retreating temper, which may express itself in many different qualities and intensities: discouragement, preoccupation, embarrassment, worry, sense of shame, feeling of inadequacy, hopelessness, despair, etc. Fearful temper is likely to lead either to a feeling of personal inferiority or to the sentiment of group stigmatization. Whether it be of the angry or fearful description, temper reinforces and intensifies the symptom, which in turn increases the temperamental reaction. In this manner, a vicious cycle is established between temper and symptom. In telling a person that wrong was done to him or that he is wrong, his temper speaks to him. The language which it uses is called temperamental lingo. Its vocabulary is limited to the terms right and wrong. Unless the person learns to ignore the threats, warnings, and incitements of the temperamental lingo, he will be the victim of angry outbursts and fearful anticipations. His tenseness will be maintained and intensified. New symptoms will be precipitated and old ones fortified. Temper is most dangerous when it plays on the symptom itself. By labeling the sensations as intolerable, feelings as terrible, impulses as uncontrollable, the lingo discourages the patient from facing, tolerating, and controlling the reaction. The very sound of the labels, intolerable, etc., is apt to rouse fear and defeatism. All a patient has to do is to call a crying reaction by the name of a crying spell, and no effort will be made to check the burst of tears. The word spell suggests uncontrollability. Substitute crying habit for crying spell, and the impossibility of stemming the flood at least will not be taken for granted. Similarly, if the patient raves about the splitting headache, the dizziness that drives me mad, the pressure I can't stand any longer, the fatalism of diction is bound to breed a despondency of mood. In order to prevent the temperamental response, the patient must be trained to ignore the whispering of temperamental lingo. Recovery language. The combined effects of symptomatic idiom and temperamental lingo are checkmated if the patient uses recovery language only. Recovery members call it proudly the recovery language. The most important parts of its vocabulary are the words sabotage and authority. The authority of the professional is sabotaged if the patient presumes to make a diagnostic, therapeutic, or prognostic statement. The verbiage of temperamental lingo, unbearable, intolerable, or uncontrollable, constitutes sabotage because the assumption that the condition is of a serious nature, which is a diagnosis, or that it is difficult to repair, which is a prognosis. It is a crass example of sabotage if the claim is advanced that my headache is there the very minute I wake up. I didn't have time to think about it. It came before I even had a chance to become emotional. How can that be nervous? A statement of this kind throws a serious doubt on the validity of the diagnosis and sabotages the professional's authority. Likewise, it is a case of self-diagnosing and consequently sabotage to view palpitations as a sign of a heart ailment, a head pressure as meaning brain tumor, a sustained fatigue as leading to physical exhaustion. Once the physician has made the diagnosis of a psychoneurotic or post-psychotic condition, the patient should not indulge in the pastime of self-diagnosing. If he does, he is practicing sabotage. If after a reasonable length of time the handicap persists in its original intensity, the indication is that sabotage is still in action. The recovery member still listens to the suggestions of the symptomatic idiom, fearing impending collapse and permanent handicap, or she gives ear to the verbal vagaries of the temperamental lingo, feeling helpless in the face of suffering. Clinging to her own mode of thinking, she sabotages the professional's efforts. Contrary to expectation, it is comforting to the patient to be called a saboteur. Considering himself as such, he knows that he has not yet learned to avoid resisting the professional. The not yet is reassuring. It suggests that in time he will learn. The recovery members encourage one another to wait until they get well. They warn one another against the impatience. The most effective slogan handed down from veteran novices: wait till you learn to give up sabotaging. The spotting technique. If the recovery member is to check these sabotaging propensities, she must be trained to spot the inconsistencies and fallacies of her own language, whether it is merely conceived in silent thought or given formulation in vocal speech. To this end, a system of spotting techniques was evolved by a means of which members learn to reject the suggestions of the symptomatic idiom and temperamental lingo whenever a symptom or temperamental reaction occur. An extensive, though necessarily incomplete description of the spotting techniques is furnished in part 3 of this book. Okay, thank you for letting me indulging me in that reading. Is there any comments on that reading? Anybody want to share what their thoughts are on that reading?
Well, I think that, the information that you shared is very helpful, because what happens a lot of times is that people are, they feel like they understand what's going on with them. And as it's stated in the reading, they begin this concept of self-diagnoses. And, as a result of that, it puts them in a position where they, are less likely to be a part of a healing process, or, any type of programming, or for that matter, even support groups, that's like, well, I know what's
Yeah,
wrong with me and I know how to fix it. you know,
right.
and so, as it's stated in the reading, it makes of less effect, a real diagnosis, or for that matter, beyond a diagnosis, a real solution. It's
Yes.
because I know what I'm doing and I know what's wrong with me and I know how to fix it. Now, when someone shows up with a process that could, help me to become more effective in my business, or help me to become more appropriate, in a work situation, or for that matter, help me to become more productive. Those things are
Yes.
not, easily utilized, because of course, you end up in a situation where it's best and you know how to fix it. So I
Yes.
mean, there was a lot of really good meat in there, and thank you for taking the time to read that for us. One of the things that happens for a lot of people is that they don't have time to really delve into good sources for material, that could help to create a better process. And I have learned that over time, when we have, mechanisms like co-working and support groups, communities, that we can actually pull out, some of those finer tuned areas, that people have taken the time to research and really put together, a set of an embodiment of work that is efficient at helping people to understand what's going on. It is an amazing thing, because the outcomes are better, the outcomes are more secure. We can, in other words, they're more
Yes.
sustainable. That's the word I'm looking for. They're more sustainable.
Yes. Yes, thank you. So we did the reading. So now in a typical meeting, after the reading, we would have introductions, everybody would introduce themselves, and then we would go on to what's called examples. I demonstrated examples last time we were on the air doing this particular class. And now I'm going to go back. I'm going to share my screen again. So give me a second. What I'm going to is some literature that we went over last time. Let's see. What am I doing? Okay. Here we go. So I want to read this little welcome thing. It says, "Welcome to Recovery International. We are pleased you're taking your first steps to better mental health. Recovery International is a self-help mental health program that offers you a low-cost method to regain and maintain your emotional health by using cognitive behavioral tools and will training. To gain inner peace, you learn how to change the way you react to people in everyday, common, average situations you have no control over. Additionally, you learn how to identify and manage negative or insecure thoughts and impulses that can lead to emotional distress and symptoms. The simple expressions and tools called SPOTS are part of the method. We offer meetings via Zoom, chat, Zoom, and in person. We encourage you to review this newcomer packet. We even have special meetings just for newcomers to learn the concepts in the 4-step method." And there's a link to find out more. Welcome, and of course, putting your mental health first. Here are some testimonials. So we have Deepak D from Pune, I guess I'm pronouncing that right, Pune, India. "I've had depression for 7 years. I used to have panic attacks. I've been attending Recovery International meetings for 2 years. Now all of these things are very much in control. The recovery program gave me the courage and confidence I needed to make some very needed changes in my life. It helped me feel that I was in control of my illness instead of feeling that the illness was controlling me. With the tools I learned and with the community to support me, my journey to better mental health is so much easier." Okay, so I don't think this is really pertinent to go through. I did go through these tempers before. In the environment, we went over this. And endorsement, we went over that. So we have, how much more time do I have? I have 8 minutes. Okay. Let's go ahead and go through some examples. I can give, well, what I'll do is I'll give an example. So this is the example format. Step 1, report a single situation or event that occurred in every day event when you begin.
Just so you know, your slides are not showing, and I'm not sure why, but it may be something going on with the system, but they're not showing. So you probably want to go back to you can continue to read, but I'm just letting you know that the slides aren't showing.
Yeah, it said only the host and the co-host could see the slides or something like that when I
all right,
hit the thing.
There's something, hold on, let me see if there's something we can do to create, to fix that.
Should I stop sharing and start sharing again?
No, I think it's not you. I think it's something with the system. Okay, there we go. We can see them now. Oh no, wait a minute, hold on. We can see them in Zoom. I just know that we can't see them on
YouTube.
YouTube. Yeah, but just go ahead and because I don't want you to miss any more of the time.
Okay. How much time do I have?
Probably about another 5 minutes or so.
Oh, 5 minutes? Okay. Yeah. So I'll do this really quickly. So step 1, report a single situation or event that occurred in every event and you began to work yourself up. Focus on a brief description of what happened, specifically what triggered temper and symptoms. So they're doing work at my apartment complex right now. It's been very loud. And, so that's what worked me up. That's what got me kind of, I had some heightened feelings, a little bit of discomfort because of the excessive noise. Okay, so report the symptoms I experience, both physical and mental. For instance, angry and fearful thoughts, confusion, palpitations, discerning impulses, tightness in your chest, lowered feeling, sweaty palms, and so on. So I had what's called air hunger, a little bit of that. And yes, I had some angry thoughts, such as, this is inconvenient and it's kind of irritating to me. I'd rather be able to rest, and can't rest with the noise. Um, and lowered feelings. Okay, so step 3, report your spotting of fearful and angry temper. The Recovery International tools used to help yourself and your self-endorsement effort. So I saw that I was definitely in an angry temper. I was irritated, frustrated, fearful temper. Maybe, would I be able to stand it? Could I bear with the discomfort that I was experiencing? Okay, these are the spots which I discussed last time in class. There are sampling of tools for spots. These are all taken from Dr. Abraham Lowe's literature. So these are what we use in cognitive behavioral therapy or education. They talk about reframing your thoughts. So this is how we reframe in Recovery International. So what Kevin can do is we also do this in the third person. So if you can't change a situation, you can change your attitude towards it. Kevin was self-led, not symptom-led. The nervous symptoms and sensations are distressing but not dangerous. So these are examples. Calm begets calm, temper begets temper. Okay. So I go through this quickly. And then I endorse myself for using these tools and sharing this example on this meeting. Okay, step 4. Before I had my recovery training, describe the technical reactions and the symptoms you experienced in former days. What would have happened then versus what happened now? This will help you note the progress you made. Before I had my recovery training, I might have been so distressed and actually worked myself up into a panic. And I might have actually tried to confront who was causing the noise. I don't know if I might have been that upset and that impulsive that that I just felt like I couldn't bear with it. And now I just bore with the discomfort and waited till the noise passed, which it did pass, and this noise is only during business hours. Okay, so then the panel, the rest of the participants would be able to give additional spots. They could spot on these things, and then at that we would close the example portion. We would close the example portion, and we would go on to what's called mutual aid. Here's another testimonial that I want to tell you. And this just goes to show you that people don't have to have a mental health component to use this information. This program was so helpful to me as a caregiver for my mom with Alzheimer's. I would get worked up during our time together, and at some of her behaviors, I used the RI tools to better manage my anger and impatience. It saved our relationship. Okay. So I'm going to stop sharing. I want to, I know, does anybody have any questions? Are there any questions that I can answer for anybody?
Kevin, I don't have any questions, but I want to say this. There is, such merit to using these skill sets because I'll give you an example. We have a proprietary method that we use. We call it, thought replacement therapy, which is based on CBT. And It's a part of a program that my husband developed called Success Thoughts. And interestingly enough, we have, been blessed to bring that information to many different types of groups. And I mean, some of them have been people who had, companies. Some of them have been cities who needed, people who were working for the city to understand how to utilize these tools. And so packaged right, the tools can be put in just about any environment because they work. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll give you an example of what I mean. There are people whose jobs are that is to call to ask people if they will pay their bills. And that
Right.
experience of being a customer service representative can sometimes draw out all types of feelings, from the people who you're requesting the bill payments from. And so consequently, people in those positions sometimes can be severely abused because they're just doing their job. They're calling to ask for, what is due. And the person on the other end of the phone is feeling attacked because they may, have some self-imposed ideas about someone asking them for this money that they really do owe, but it's a situation where unfortunately they don't necessarily they may not have the money, or they may have the money but they may not want to pay it. They may not feel that they owe it, or there are lots of things, there's lots of reasons. But the
Mm-hmm.
person who is asking sometimes becomes a victim of that, those feelings coming out, and they lash out, they say all kinds of, of inappropriate things. I've seen people curse out the person or slam the phone down, because the person is, even calling them. And even though they might be calling at the times that they're allowed to call, it's immediately because you're calling me, asking me for this money that I do not have or that I do not want to give you, you shouldn't be calling me at all. And so I have often thought that if we had better skills, um, there would be a way to deal with that situation. I never forget, my outcome was a lot different because when a bill collector had called me about a bill that I really did owe, and this is years and years ago, my children were young, I didn't have the finances, to spread that month, to take care of it. But I
Mm-hmm.
remember getting an outcome that I didn't expect. Now, not that they forgave the debt, because they didn't forgive the debt, but they gave me such a lengthy time to pay it at $10 a month. Okay, we'll take $10 a month from you, and we just want you to get this taken care of, and we don't want it to go on your credit. And I tell you that the way that they approached it changed the way that I approached it, because
Mm-hmm.
I had feelings, and I mean, they could have gone all over the map, but unfortunately, not unfortunately, fortunately, the person who was on the other end had some skills, and their skills changed my way of viewing the situation, and it made me more amenable to, letting go of the $10. That really was a stretch for me, even at that time, because I mean, I couldn't figure out how to get $10 out of that budget, but I did it. I paid that $10 because I remembered I made a commitment to that person that I would make sure that I paid it until it was paid in full. And I've had other situations later in life where, similar things that occurred, and I, remember calling, and I didn't wait for them to call me. I called and said, "Hey, I cannot make this payment the way that it's set up right now, but I will gladly, do it if you can allow me to pay this amount." And
Mm-hmm.
so I share that because I think it's so important for people to understand that, it's often the way that we handle things that changes the outcomes. And even
Right.
as managers, as business owners, sometimes businesses have to get on the line and make conversations happen that are difficult. I mean, I remember doing a podcast not that long ago, maybe it's less than a year ago, where I was asked, how do you fire someone? How do you
Yeah.
let someone go, okay? And so the
Right.
skills that you learn from RI can be applied even to that, the
Right.
way that I approached the situation, and I shared it, it was on Instagram, the contents of that full interview. But the interesting thing is the person who was doing the interview, and he was like, wow, that's an approach that I've never seen. And so it's just having a better set of skills gives you more to work with when you have to enter any kind of situation, and so, I mean, having to fire somebody is not ever, or to let somebody go, maybe it's nothing that they did, maybe it's just not a good fit, and
Right.
fortunately, when you have skills, you can tell someone that in a way that doesn't leave them feeling like, hey, it was something I did. It had to have been something I said. I don't care, how many times you tell a person, no, it's not you, it's me. They sometimes will leave based on the situation, feeling like, no, it had to be something I did. But when you have the skill set and you're able to have that conversation in a way that leaves them, without any, options to feel like they were a problem or that there was something going on with them, you know, it really does help. And the other thing that I want to say about your sharing today, a lot of what's happening in our society in this era, the stigma with regards to mental illness and mental challenges, emotional well-being, soft skills, dealing with all things professionalism that are overarching, into, being able to be a good, productive citizen as well as a good, person professionally and personally,
Mm-hmm.
stem from having a skill set in this, area, being able to cognitively be aware of how you deal with, situations and solutions, people and personalities, challenges, and barriers or perceived barriers. And
Mm-hmm.
the skills that you shared with us today are all skills that we can utilize to help each other become better. Setting up the focus groups, setting up times to have community, even in a workplace scenario, is extremely effective in helping for team building, because a lot of us, when we have more than two people working, even when we have two people working together, we need to be able to build community and build a team. And we can't get things done without having good skills. So thank you so much. We really
You're
do
welcome.
appreciate what you've done with us today and how you have, helped us to understand the appropriateness of having these skills and being able to put them forth. And we look forward to having you back again, and we will see you again next time.